Hey, listeners, and welcome to the You Are Epic podcast. This is where we honour the people who've helped build not just our industry, but our communities. I'm Angela Hucker, and I am so glad that you're here. So, I'm taking the time to sit down with people who've been in construction for years, people who've been through the ups, the downs, and everything in between. You're going to hear real stories of resilience, growth, and moments that shaped who they are. This podcast is for those that want to learn more from people who've been walking this path for some time, and they're helping to lift up others and quietly making a difference along the way. It's also to show you that your journey matters and your voice matters. And in case you've forgotten, you are epic. Let's get into it. Today's guest is Tony Avsec, a decorated industry expert, associate professor, and Order of Australia Medal recipient with over 30 years' experience shaping some of the world's most complex infrastructure projects. A fellow of the Australian Institute of Building and a chartered building professional, Tony is renowned for his precision in cost planning, risk management, and design optimization across sectors like defence, health, aviation, and retail. With a passion for mentoring and a global outlook, he is a powerful force for innovation, insight, and excellence in the built environment. So, thank you so much for joining us, Tony. It's an honour to have you here.
Glad to be here.
Awesome. So, one, how I'd like to always start with my guest, which is what I'm always curious about. How did you get started in this industry?
Well, if you go far enough back, I originally wanted to be an architect, and it's often you look at sort of what influences you to select a career in the industry, and it's one of the things I often ask when I go to universities and talk to the students to understand how we direct people in our industry. But my family worked in aerospace. So my dad was a head toolmaker for one of the two aircraft manufacturing companies in the country. No connection to our industry whatsoever. And I think there was two TV series I watched when I grew up that had architects as sort of main characters, and I thought that'd be a cool sort of thing to do. And um, I think when I was a teenager, I went through the mid-70s recession and saw the 6 o'clock news with architects driving taxis, and I thought, I need a bit of a rethink on that. And I was particularly good at technical drawing in the high school I went to, and so my neighbour was an architectural drafty, so as a sort of teenager, I was drawing up sort of house plans for which was pretty scary. I was
Oh,
like given whole
wow.
streets to basically work out what houses went where and what their orientation was. And the head drafty said, "Oh, you don't want to be an architect. You want to go and do a building degree." And that's how I ended up in building. So,
Wow. Okay. So, you did a
yeah.
building degree, and so where did that kind of lead you next?
Dad insisted that I had to sort of do basically work from straight out of high school, so I had to get a cadetship, which was something that anyone studying engineering at where he worked, that's what they did. But it was 1980 when I started the industry. It was, I think, 1980 and 83 were both recessions at the time, but it's
Yeah.
something that's a bit foreign to people today. They get to experience a proper recession. And I was one of only two of 110 people that started that actually had cadetship straight out of high school.
Wow.
So yeah, worked for, well, I guess you consider a legacy tier one builder back then. That was interestingly at the time it was through the AIB. There was a retired professor that they had a careers sort of centre in North Sydney that I wandered in there, having no idea of the industry, no contacts, no where to start. And he looked at sort of, I was academically fairly gifted, and uh, he called up one of his past students who happened to be a general manager of a builder, and certainly wasn't dressed for an interview. I sort of had like a torn Hawaiian shirt on and shorts, and he said, "Oh, he can see you in half an hour. He was around the corner." And I was sort of panicking and thinking, "Oh, it's not exactly looking the part for me." And he got the position, and he was sort of surprised. Yeah, it was. He looked at my academic results and, "Why do you want to be a builder?" I said, "You could be a doctor or a lawyer." I said, "No, I want to be a builder." So yeah, I guess university was a bit of a breeze for me. I was probably one of the smarter ones in the room, and so when everyone else had a hard time doing structures, I just breezed through, and walk out sort of halfway through the exam whistling and getting 95%, and he was just
Wow.
sort of stress out the rest of the class. But he said, "What are we doing wrong?"
So you've definitely got a gift for it then.
Yeah, that's probably why I gravitated towards the front end. So yeah, I did my first year in estimating, which I can highly recommend anyone starting in the industry. You should
Mm,
do that. Yes, you'll be picking up the phone, talking to subcontractors, but you do learn how to scope a package, what's in the
yeah,
package,
yeah.
um, and you get direct feedback being involved in tenders as to sort of who is competitive for doing whatever part of the building is. So that sets you up in good stead. Because at the end of the day, something I learned ultimately as an estimating manager that you can only uh, be as competitive on a tender as the competitive floor of your business as to the
Mm,
business's ability to deliver and procure competitively. So for the and when you do you eventually get into that role, that's a key responsibility you have. You're
mm.
working with your general manager and sort of keeping tension on the delivery teams to make sure that particularly if you're doing a lot of negotiated work, because they'll get fat and happy. And there was an expression in my time at Lend Lease where there was preferred subcontractors that were regularly used that they were called koalas, which was protected species.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah,
and I used to upset some of the teams because if you sort of had a fat and happy price overall, I'd call it the koala sanctuary.
yeah,
Yeah, because
yeah,
it was
yeah.
so that was always a challenge, particularly when you're doing internal projects, because people tend to forget ultimately that the development business or it might be the funds management. At the end of the day, someone has to compete in the market. So you might have a captive internal client, but at the end of the day, you have to respect that you're all working together
Exactly.
to be competitive overall on the project. But people can lose sight of that when you're too far removed from the pointy end of competition. So
Yeah. And that's where like the estimating side as well, like it really does give you that visibility about, how to actually price things. And, I've been on the back end of that with managing the contracts, once a project is awarded and seeing, if there are issues from an estimating side, how that can actually impact the project delivery as well. So,
yeah, I often sort of say that you get whatever it is depending on the scale of the bid. It might be 4 to 8 weeks sort of 10% of the documentation that the construction team gets to come up with their budgets. And then they spend the next 2 years with only 20 people picking over all your work and finding sort of all the things
oh
that you've
yeah.
missed. So,
Yeah, yes, yes. So tell us about where you went after that, after being an estimating manager. What was your next sort of step after that?
yeah, well, I guess the journey, that's one of the sort of challenges. When I first started back in the old civil and civic, I was a month in of my 33 years tenure there. And basically, I said, if you want to stay here long term, you've got to be one of three things. You're on your way to the top, you're a specialist, or you're a developer of people. And I noticed that climbing the slippery sort of pole of management was sort of you sold your soul, and the pyramid had got smaller as you got to the top. So I noticed the people that had the 20, 30-year service were mostly sort of foremen, site managers, and estimators. Everyone else seemed to pass through the business. So specialising and developing people is what I sort of generally sort of focused on, and that's I guess why I tend to gravitate towards mentoring, is that I can
Mm,
point to a lot of people around the industry that are in senior roles that I had a pretty significant hand in their career. But yeah, that was the sort of challenge that um, because when I moved, I originally grew up in Sydney. I moved to Queensland in '88, the month before Expo '88 started, which was an
I
interesting
remember
time.
Expo. Yes, I did go to that.
Yes, it was, people talk about the rental crisis and tell you a week out from Expo starting, and it was an interesting time to try and find somewhere for a family moving up from interstate
I
for
can
somewhere to live.
imagine. I can
So
imagine.
it was some pretty basic places you had to pick from.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that meant because the head office of the organisation was in Sydney, to go any further than an estimating manager in the local office meant you had to go back to Sydney, which I had no interest in moving back there.
Mm. Mm.
So I had to then engineer a role that I could sort of do long term after that. So that's when I basically took on the lead sort of cost planning role of the discipline on mega projects, which generally operate as almost as their own businesses. So I was joined at the hip with a project director that we sort of went around doing sort of, the largest projects in the business. That are often our project was bigger than the entire Queensland sort of operation. And, I had one project ultimately that was a PPP that was a mega hospital that made up 40% of the Australian turnover. So, and
Wow.
the when we won that one, I had as my Windows wallpaper the share price for the day showing the blip, but when it got announced, but when there was a lot of personal satisfaction in personally
Yeah.
influencing the share price of an ASX top 50 company. So
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Well done. Well done. So would that be like if you think back about your career, what's kind of a would that be the standout project for you, or is there a different project that's kind of a bit of a standout project that's been a real highlight for you to be involved in?
yeah, look, it's hard to sort of. They've all had. There's been some pretty significant ones along the way. Like Sunshine Plaza was one that I was on that for a total of 5 years. And that was a great project because it was a different era of the organisation where the corporation directors of the parent company would chair the project control group meetings, which it really made an in-house project sort of hum as a single entity when someone at the top sort of takes on that leadership role.
Mm,
It tends to sort of resolve all that sort of, it's like sibling rivalry that you get between the construction business, the development business, the retail leasing people, the investment management people. There's
yeah.
all many different parts of the machine that sort of all come together, and when those parts all work in sync, then you collectively make a lot of money. But
Yeah.
it takes some pretty effective leadership to bring all those parts together so they all behave and work as one.
Mm.
So yeah, that was quite satisfying. Probably Gold Coast University Hospital was pretty satisfying for me. I was on that one for 4 years. And yeah, and ultimately, I look back, one of my nieces, her life was saved in there
Oh,
a couple of
wow.
years after it was open. So when a major piece of social infrastructure like that, when you see its
Yeah.
positive effect on the community, I enjoy those projects probably more so than doing sort of like high-end apartments or generally stayed away from doing office buildings. They're really pretty simple and boring sort of projects from my point of view. So.
Mm. Yeah. So what makes those kind of projects a standout for you? What's the difference with them?
Probably, well, one, I guess we were in there early enough for where the site hadn't even been selected. So you had huge influence. I know with um, the lessons I'd learnt off that project, and when I applied it when we did the PPP bid on Sunny Coast Hospital, which was a similar scale of project. That one was being a PPP, but I was able to have pretty much total influence over the direction of the design. So
Mm.
I basically developed off just doing area analysis and worked out. Area efficiencies is one of those things if you can get in early enough in my role as a cost planner and drive that. For the same number of beds, we built about 20,000 square metres less floor area in terms of built area, in
Okay.
terms of driving area efficiency, which and I remember having a discussion with one of my peers, one of the losing competitors, and he said, "I don't understand why we weren't competitive." And we had the best formwork rates, straight into just typical tender estimator, straight into the minutiae. I said, "How big was your building?" "I don't know." I said, "Well, that's why you lost it." Because, you have to. So I often say you have to work out how to simplify the message to clients, particularly development managers. They're interested in what they get income off, which is the net lettable area, net saleable area if it's apartments, because they don't care about the rest. But they have to pay the builder to build the gross floor area, and it's the difference between those two that you've got to pay attention to.
So where do you see like, today in the current climate, things are quite tumultuous, let's say, and particularly where you are in Southeast Queensland, where there's obviously everything happening for the 2032 Olympics as well. And I understand all those tender packages are due to be released by the end of this year from recent information that I've received. But, those sorts of things that you've mentioned about the floor area and things like that, how do you see that as something that's valuable for, these large projects moving forward, taking those sorts of things into consideration and, from an estimating point of view, that estimators need to take into consideration when they're doing their estimations as well?
Yeah, well, that's where the difference between cost planning and estimating comes into the fore, which is it's guiding the direction of design. And when I had a national cost planning manager that he used to sort of navigate in rally cars. He is his sort of side hustle for a hobby. And his analogy was that the project manager was the rally car driver, and you as the cost planner was the navigator. And it's about timely information that when you get to a fork in the road and key design decision, it's left or right. It's giving the project a nudge in the right direction. And that's
Mm,
one thing I've learned over time, that because, the design teams, generally, there's a lot of pressure on their fees now. So they can only draw the project once. And if you let it get off track and you've got a abortive design that you're having to redocument the project, that usually results in there's less fees to do the real documentation, the construction documentation, and that's what you're setting yourself up for a long-term battle that you're trying to get. See it so many times, you're trying to get the real details out that you need to actually construct the project, and
mm,
you'll find that there's huge pressure on that structural engineer, service engineer, whatever, that they've spent their fees. The directors are sort of putting a lot of pressure on them to sort of shut down the sort of the continuation of documentation, because and then that gets reflected in it's costing you money on site because you're not getting quality documentation. So supply chain sees there's a risk and it's poorly sort of documented, and so we start shoving all that risk down the Teflon tube, down to any trade contractor that's got to try and build the bloody thing. And he's just on a world of hurt. If you can start off on the right foot, then the money's in there, so everyone has a chance of making money.
mm,
And it's a lot less stressful on the project, and it's how you start it, from. So if you can keep it on track at the start, it's a much more pleasant journey for everybody.
mm. And one thing that you touched on there, which I think is really key, is that risk. And because projects are all about risk management and who's actually taking the risk. And this is a big issue for, like the smaller contractors as well, that they're not normally given the opportunity to negotiate and factor in costs to account for those risks because they're done by the principal contractor or the head contractor who understand what all those risks are. And then they're automatically just passed down with the flow down clauses and everything. And, how do you see that impact in the industry where we are at the moment?
I think it's now that you're seeing a situation where I think in some ways the table's turned a bit, where as people are leaving the industry, we're all talk about the labour shortage, and that's just demographics catching up with us. My generation's, on the youngest end of the baby boomers, are all retiring, and there's our kids haven't had enough kids to replace us for these. So I don't want to go to careers fairs. We're competing with every other industry to sort of, hey, come and work in our industry. And, we're trying to sell the merits of our industry. So I think you need to be starting to, think like an owner and know when to walk away, when it's a bad deal, because you don't want to be taking on a project that's going to kill your business.
Mm,
And I think you're starting to see a bit of that. And I'm seeing differences in how subbies priced to me from where I was to where I am now. I go to annual sort of subby get-togethers where I am now. I have subcontractors walking up to me saying, "Oh, when you can do more work in Brisbane, we'd love working for you." There's not too many other builders that you would have that sort of situation
yeah,
happening. And
yeah.
that's just being efficient, using the tools right, how you manage the project, so that, and I remember it was in 1990. I think it was in the recession then. We got all the owners of the major subcontractors in, and we said, "Well, the world's changed. What can we do for you to make ourselves more efficient so that you're making money, so you can give us a better price?"
Mm,
And it was quite a good open discussion. There's not too many builders that be brave enough to sort of have that,
mm,
get that genuine feedback from their supply chain. But
mm.
it'd make a big difference to your business if you did. And we had generally the civil guys, the structure contractors. We love working for you. We give you a 10% better price because you're all over managing your program with your sort of long range, medium range, fortnightly, short range. When you say you need 10 people turning up on site in 2 days or whatever, you're ready. The area is genuinely ready for me to productively work and
Mm,
make money.
mm.
And too many times, time management's poorly done.
Yeah.
People just look at the bloody expensive wallpaper they've got a consultant planner to do. Oh, it says I should have 20 for tilers on today, so I started using the tiler to turn up. I know when I was at GRC, I was doing major disputes. They were a professional QS firm, and some of the stuff, there was one I was working on was a gold mine expansion where the client's PM clearly wasn't managing the program, was abusing them to, you need to have steel on site to really, erect whatever part of the gold ore processing plant was. Footings hadn't even been poured because he hadn't been to site. And it's stuff like that, you know. And
Mm.
it's still going on. It's just, I keep saying, get out of the site shed, walk your sites. What I did as a
Actually,
cadet.
correct. And I actually say that for even the corporate offices, like people should actually get out and go onto the sites and see what's actually going on because it will give you a better understanding of the complexities of what happens day to day on an actual construction site. You can't make decisions sitting in a corporate office in Sydney, Melbourne, or Brisbane without actually knowing firsthand what are these people facing every day on this project.
Yeah, yeah. That's certainly if you work in regional areas. And a colleague of mine I trained up, he highlighted there's three levels of pricing when you go in sort of far north Queensland. So there's the local pricing to a local builder that you probably won't see if you're not don't have an office up there.
No?
There's next level of pricing where you at least get on the plane and go up there and meet the person, shake their hand and eyeball them and walk them through what you want. And then there's that third level of pricing, which is probably what we're seeing in some of these hospitals that haven't gone ahead, where you just do it all from your corporate office and you just
Yeah.
email out a link to 2,000 drawings and just make them figure it out. And you've got a 200-page contract that's got
Yeah.
every bad experience clause. It's something I learned in my uni days about, had a problem and a fight with someone, so let's put another clause in the contract. So before you know it, you can't jump over the contract because it's full of so many bad experience clauses rather than actually administering your contract properly in the first
Yeah.
place.
Yeah. 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 And I definitely can account for that. Having worked on a lot of regional projects and being a FIFO worker myself is, it's a like a regional tax. If you're not actually based there and you're dealing with the people, then you get the city rates essentially.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
mm. But it's, this whole industry is built on relationships and, like from time, and I'm sure you've seen that, I think the number is like 80% of the jobs aren't even advertised in this industry because it's all based on relationships and who you know. And like you said earlier about your koala, your koala part as well, like that's how the industry has always operated. So,
Yep. It's that personal, and I've sort of saw we had an assistant estimator when I was at Lend Lease, and she ultimately became a commercial manager. She wanted to do something else, but like she went, it was how you talk to people on the phone, and I
mm,
see the younger generation is just intimidated picking up the phone and talking to people. They just want to
yeah,
do it all on sort of text messaging. It's that personal touch, it's the
yeah,
soft skills. You've got to be able to talk to someone. And, like she would know the details of their kids or whatever. She'd have that
yeah,
sort of that sort of small talk conversation before she went into what the business was about. You're interested in pricing this job, just not launching straight into it. That that was building the relationships, and that's how you got a good price.
Yeah. And it's the rapport. And it's like any relationship, whether it's a business relationship, a friendship, whatever it is, you have to establish that rapport with the other party for them to want to actually engage further with you as well.
Hmm.
So what I'd love to hear more about, Tony, is your OAM, being an OAM recipient. How did that come about?
Uh, yeah, I two aspects. I've now spent 30 years on the Australian Institute of Building's Queensland chapter committee, so it's longer than what you get for murder. So, so I've got worked out how to escape from it. But I guess it's so yeah, time I volunteered. I guess I had my kids pretty young, and I only got one granddaughter, so I've got a lot of time on my hands at my stage of life. So um, then I do a lot of guest lecturing, mostly at QUT, where I'm adjunct associate professor there. And I just enjoy giving back this stage of life. And I say to people, look, the knowledge is no good to me in retirement, so I share it freely with whoever's interested. I have
Mm.
no qualms about that. So yeah, it was probably those two areas. Well, I do volunteer a fair bit of time, and it's partly also I'm conscious of that I am very much getting towards the twilight of my career, and building some interests outside of work to sort of keep myself amused. So I don't end up like some sad sort of men I see walking around following their buddy wives around the shopping centres in
Yeah.
each week. They don't know what to do with themselves.
Yeah, yeah. No, you definitely need hobbies, don't you? So I'm glad you found some purpose with some of the things that you're doing with volunteering. And thank you for the contribution you make in that regards as well, because it is valuable. And one of the other contributions that you do is with mentoring, and I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, I've had, I guess, a huge influence on young people's careers in the industry. Some of it's been through QUT's mentoring program. It's quite well developed down there. It's been going for a long time. I look back on some of my greatest successes. Some of them were, national estimating managers for other sort of builders, so quite in leadership roles. One young lady says she's over in the States, but she did the QS degree at QUT. I think it might have been through the NAWIC mentoring program. This is probably 10 years ago now, but she was project managing some very high-end fit-outs of penthouses in New York City that she had budgets of 50 to 100 million US fit-out.
Wow.
So,
That would be nice, wouldn't it?
yeah,
Penthouse.
that's right. I guess that was a different era before they had to ask where the money came from now. So I don't think
Yeah.
the money's flowing as freely, but I think she's down in Florida now. She's co-director of a business down there and she's only in the 30s. She's only just recently got married. So she's done exceptionally well for herself. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great.
And I've seen that in a lot of the times it's in young women. It's just having the confidence to give it a
Mm.
go. And I think I've heard of these sort of NOAC events where in applying for a job, a man who meets 70% of the criteria will put their hand up and apply. Often women who meet 100% of the criteria will still doubt themselves and,
Yep.
you know, just it's not taking it personally. It's the art of negotiation. They can only say no. Just got to ask.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and don't fear rejection. You just dust yourself off and give it another go. And you just got to persevere.
That's right. So with your mentoring, I mean, you mentioned about the lady in the US as a bit of a standout. Have you got any other moments that or people that you've mentored over the years who've been, just moments that you're really proud of that it's like, oh wow, like I've been able to do this and help the next generation and look at what it's helping this other person be able to achieve in their career or their life as well.
Yeah, well, the current one I'm sort of helping at the moment. So been mentoring for 2 years. So he's originally from China. He was a Bond Uni grad. He was just working for a pontoon company, sort of a bespoke specialist area, and he's now sort of estimating manager of a civil company 2 years later. So with a
Awesome.
team of estimators, and they're working all through. far north Queensland and Northern Territory, and he's doing that basically remotely because their work is all over the place, so they don't actually have a proper physical office because their team is it's an interesting way of running a business.
Yeah.
So, so he gets to live the dream on the Sunshine Coast, and he does a bit of travel, to sort of on some projects in Catherine in the Northern Territory. So he's was able to give him some advice on that through my time at Lend-Lease about sort of working in those parts of the country and sort of what to look for. So
Awesome. That's great. No, I love that. And it's great when you can see the impact that it's making as well, when you're able to help give back to other people and see them flourish as a result of that. So what sort of what's your driver? Why are you passionate about, doing this and the contribution that you're doing? Because there's always a driver behind people when they are giving back selflessly. What's your driver? Why do you do this?
look, I've always found growing the team under you and makes your job easier. So and I guess the analogy coming from the son of a toolmaker to me, when you focus on developing the skills of your team, it's like to me sharpening the tools in your toolbox and makes your job easier to sort of ultimately bring that team together. They're all working at the best of their ability, so it runs a lot more seamlessly. So
Mm,
it's in your own interest. So people ask me, why do I do guest lectures down at QUT? Well, ultimately, it means the quality of the graduate that comes out that I go to employ is better for it. They're more ready for what we're looking for when they say. And it also, I guess, a bit of self-interest, particularly if you get heavily involved in a subject, you get to figure out which students are the bright ones. And
yeah.
um, you know, I take the approach because it's in company time, so I'm already being paid by my work to be there. So they're allowing me to sort of take time off to do that. So I put the slides on the corporate slides. So it's a bit of sort of soft marketing of the business. So I did a guest lecture yesterday. Had three students come up to me. How do I work for Bill?
Love it. So what's the vision in the future looking like for you? You mentioned about, you're getting to the point where it's, close to retirement age and things like that, but there's obviously still a huge passion that you've got inside of you and you're very, dedicated to the industry and stuff. And you don't want to be following your wife around the shopping centre, of course.
No.
So what's the future kind of looking like for Tony?
I probably will see that I might expand my involvement in what I'm doing at the universities. I do really enjoy doing guest lectures. I guess like some people like getting up on a stage, be comedians. I'm focusing now on trying to make my lectures more engaging to keep the attention of the audience. Don't want it to be too dry, so it's almost becomes like a performance for me. So I am enjoying that. So I'm selective in what I do there. Guest lectures are pretty easy. They're low taxing stuff, taking on the whole subject. I did that once while I was working full time. I wouldn't do it again. It's a whole administration of running an entire subject in the university is quite onerous. So happy to sort of just breeze in and do a couple of guest lectures. That sort of suits me fine.
And so
Um,
what's your guest lectures on? What sort of topics?
um, I do three in estimating. So one that I did on a Monday is on concrete pumping, and the example I use there, as I explained to the students, is it's a major piece of plant, and what I'm using as an example to highlight that when you do go and hire a plant, could be a mobile crane, whatever, you want to make sure you've got a good day's work organised for that kit to turn up. You just don't
Correct.
turn up to lift something off a truck and send it back again.
Correct.
And I work through examples and just use the scenario that if you poured the stairs down with the floor versus bringing the pump back just to do the stairs, and sort of what the difference is in the cost per cubic metre, when you account for all the, I said you're paying for the equipment from the moment it leaves the yard until it's cleaned up, ready for the next person to use it. So,
Mm,
it might be a minimum of 4 hours by the time you turn it around. So,
mm,
you don't want to be pouring 2 cubic metres of concrete because your site supervisor's got lazy and didn't get the stairs ready in time when you're pouring the slab. So,
mm.
and that just highlights then the importance about if you want to sort of buy well against your budgets, you need to be organised on site. And it was a simple real life example I can understand. So my other two lectures in that subject is I do cash flows and escalation. I did escalation forecasting for 25 years in my time at Lend-Lease, and probably not surprised that things got as far as they did with friendly union brothers, because when you were looking at inflation running at 2 to 3% a year, and yeah, it's very effective negotiations that were able to get 4.5 to 5% per annum, but
Mm.
that yawning gap was creating a sort of market sort of problem, and that
Yeah.
gap was getting bigger and bigger, and then they were having to get more and more aggressive in sort of essentially protecting their turf, because people were looking for ways of sort of doing more non-union work. So in some ways, I'm not surprised it got to where it did to, because it's the disconnect between what people can afford, and I'm seeing that now where you can be the lowest price on a project, and thanks for giving us a great price, but it still doesn't stack up, so the project doesn't go ahead.
Yeah.
So we're seeing that in a lot of the tier ones being a bit quiet at the moment. So,
Correct. Yeah. And a lot of
so
these government projects as well, where they do an initial estimation and then, it might be, let's say, $1 billion, and then, the stuff starts and then it's like, oh, actually, no, it's going to be about 2.5 now. So,
yep. And you're
mm,
seeing the electrical package in hospitals has hit $3,000 a square metre now, which, think about
wow.
that, $3,000 a square metre.
A squared meter, and you've got a hospital with how many squared meters?
That's right. If you're talking about 150,000 square metres like Sunny Coast Hospital, that's just, and that particular trade's got its own issues. Where you just need so many more kids doing trays, because you're competing against data centers, which they're making so much money off data centers, so they'll outbid you. Mining, same issue. If you're in that sort of space, a mining project has a payback period of probably, I don't know, 2 3 years tops, but so
Mm,
they'll happily pay more to get people.
mm,
The reconfiguring of the electrical grid. I know Powerlink in Queensland spending tens of billions of dollars.
mm.
While people talk about renewable energy being technically free, there's no fuel input. Unfortunately, it's not going in where the old coal-fired power stations, where the
Mm.
existing spider web of the HV grid propagates from. So that's a hidden cost that we're now starting to see all that sort of bite. And
Oh,
again,
yeah.
that's more electricians. And I know the HV ticketed electricians, when they brought in the $3 million super sort of extra tax, there was senior electricians that were complaining because they were now liable for that tax. That's the kind of money that they were making working for some of these organisations.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
good place to be an electrician. It's if I had sort of teenagers at this stage of life, I'd be sort of saying, that'd be your choice trade. AI is not going to eat your job, and you'll be rolling in money.
Yeah. So what do you think the industry kind of needs moving forward to help make it better?
Um, I think there's an opportunity with AI to improve the white collar productivity. I know when I benchmark prelims from 20, 30 years ago to today, the headcount of people on site is significantly higher than what it used to be. I think there's opportunities there to improve the efficiency of what we do. Um, we need to get, we've got a demographic problem that we need to work out how we're going to solve that, because we haven't got enough workers coming into any industry at the moment, because it's
Yeah.
my generation leaving. There's just not enough people coming in, so we have to work out how to do things more efficiently, and maybe that's through robotics in some key areas. I've certainly seen it in what we did with Sunny Coast Hospitals. We had AGVs, automatic guided vehicles, that we put in there to reduce the sort of non-medical staff, where basically that would pick up, you distribute the clean laundry, bring back the sort of baskets of the dirty laundry, and same with all the plates, and the food would go out and same thing. So all that movement the food and sort of linen was all handled by AGVs. So
Mm.
I'm actually surprised. I expected Queen's Wharf was going to do that because we're a high wage country and there's a lot of jobs like that. And I know I was involved in some research at QUT on robotic overhead drilling, and at the time through QUT didn't sort of proceed with them, but we had Hilti in as our industry partner, and you now can buy that machine now. So if you look up the
Okay.
JBot, JAI bot, you'll see it's pretty much exactly what we sort of were toying
Oh,
around with the
wow.
idea.
Okay.
We never got to fully develop it. So hats off to Hilti to taking our concept and turning it into a real commercial product. And,
Yeah.
it's stuff like that we could make our industry a lot more efficient.
Mm.
And yeah, the because I had some of the team was international on Sunny Coast Hospital, so they brought ideas from other parts of the world that
Mm.
we weren't familiar with, and that's one of the things I described as what you're trying to do is reduce the parts count on site. The most expensive place to put a building together or infrastructure is on site. And
Mm.
I did a lot of process industrial projects. So there's when you do stuff off site in a crude manufacturing environment, there's a lot of opportunity for efficiency. But in reducing the parts count when you're doing remote work, which you would have been doing,
Mm.
you've also got to fit within the transport envelope of getting those larger modules out on site. You don't want it to exceed what needs a police escort.
Yeah.
I think there is a lot of opportunity there to reduce some of the labour, and then potentially, if we are getting off-site, we can then start to look at maybe that's better opportunities for robotics than actually on-site itself. But even on-site, there's a lot. We spend a lot of money protecting fragile human beings with things like scaffolding and the like. Is there an opportunity for some of the more dangerous roles that we have on site where we could use robots in those situations?
Mm.
I saw it when I've done defence projects. Now seeing it with, I went to a lunch yesterday with the Minister for Defence Industry, and the Australian government spending $10 billion on drones, but because they're now realising if you get the fragile human being out of the kit, it
Correct.
greatly simplifies it. So like the Boeing GoSpats, but they're not constrained by the G forces of the poor fragile pilot that's inside the
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of opportunity in what you can do there. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the two main ones from what I understand from what you've shared is about the productivity and then embracing technology, essentially with AI and robotics.
yeah,
Well, that's great. Now, look, in closing, what I always love to ask everyone is if you had someone standing in front of you and you wanted to pass on some Tony words of wisdom, whether that's a comment, just a phrase or a statement or something that you've gone, if I ever have the opportunity to just say this to someone about the industry, what would that be? What is Tony's words of wisdom?
I guess when you're considering an organisation to apply for, you need to do some due diligence, understanding how they secure their work, and that'll have a lot of influence whether it's a great place to work. If they know what they're good at and they focus on that, then it's a great place to work because it's an efficient business. But if they chase anything and everything, it's not going to be a great place.
Hmm. So how would people find that kind of information? Like if you're an employee and you're going to look at a prospective employer, for example, and you want to do a bit of due diligence on them to know have they got a good culture, have they got, longevity of projects, things like that. What is the best avenue for someone to be able to find that kind of information? Because there's a lot of people who say they have a lot of stuff, but in reality, when people start, it is completely different. So how could we dive into that a little deeper for people?
Look, I think it's so much easier today to research anyone in any
Yeah.
business on the internet. There's really no excuse now. So you can see what projects they've got going. You can sort of see just by visiting their sites, sort of seeing it's a well-run site, it's tidy, sort of, see who the contractors are working, you might just, and it's just striking up conversation with people. So So it's Glassdoor is something I'm sort of aware of, where you can sort of see where basically employees review their businesses. So that gives you some clues as to what a business is like. But yeah, in our industry, it's often the supply chain will give you some clues as to sort of when you start talking to them, if who they like working for, who they don't, they're organised, because you don't want to be in the meat grinder if the business isn't sort of well run, and you're the
Mm.
one trying to sort of pedaling furiously to sort of trying to keep the project on track.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if you're trying to continually recover costs and, scope changes and everything like that as well, like it just flows on and on and on. So,
That's probably the biggest thing I tell the mentees now that they're looking for work. I try to sort of kind of things to look for in organisations to consider working for, and stay when they do start with a business, sort of touching base with them to see if running well for them or what issues they're having. So
yeah, yeah. And look, I agree because it needs to be a good fit for both parties, not just the employer, but it needs to be for the employee as well, because essentially you're spending majority of your time in that work environment. So you need to know that, it's something that is actually works well for you.
yeah, well, I often say too is the more influence you have over your boss's profitability, the more they can afford to pay you. So um, so that maybe that's why I gravitated towards the front end of the business. I
Yeah,
do admit I'm a deal junkie. I like winning work. Um, so and that often means that consultancies, you're just selling your time. So it's you won't be paid as well as working for a contractor. But the trick is finding the contractor that's knows their niche and they're focused on it. And it's a great place to work because there's a lot out there just price queue gov tenders or whatever, and it's anything and everything. And I remember as a cadet, I used to poke fun at the tender estimators at Fletcher's where I was working, saying, oh, I'll never do that job. That's a mug's game, because what they were doing was a mug's game, because
yeah.
there was no strategy.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. I love that to do your due diligence on the on where you're going to work as well, because it is so vital, especially these days where there is, the competition is tough and you need to know that you're going to a place that's, going to where you're going to be in an environment where you can thrive as well. So,
Yeah, and at the early stage, it's all about you've got to focus on the learning before you earn. You want to go to a place that's going to develop you. And that's what I do with the mentees. I sort of
yeah.
roadmap your sort of your competencies and skills, and put your hand, look at what you're doing and saying, okay, I haven't covered that. Can I, my next role, I want to do this particular role. If you're estimating, maybe you haven't done build up prelims, for example, or something like that. So you become a well-rounded sort of professional that you can do all the things that you need to be able to do.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree, and I love that. Well, Tony, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an honor to have you here and for you to share all this incredible wisdom and knowledge that you've got from all these decades of working in the industry in different ways and, well deserved with your OAM as well. So thank you for your contributions that you're giving back to the industry, the people that you're mentoring, and the ripple effect that you're making as well. So very grateful for the changes that you're doing. So thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode today. I hope this conversation gave you something that you can take with you, whether it be a little bit of insight, inspiration, or maybe just a reminder that you're not alone. If it resonated with you, please share because we're better when we help build each other up. And remember that your experience, your story, and your journey, it all matters more than you know. Until next time, stay kind, stay connected, and never forget you are epic.